Hello and welcome to the Guitar Hang Podcast. I'm your host, John Stancorb. Today we're diving into the captivating world of Andy Wood. You might recognize Andy from his versatile career, which includes collaborations with notable artists like Rascal Flatts, Gary Laveau, Scott Stapp, and his thriving solo journey. Andy's name is synonymous with guitar excellence, and he's amazed us with his performances and recordings. Andy and I take a journey through his musical universe, exploring his career, creative ventures, and what ignites his passion for the guitar. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell for notifications. And now, let's hang with Andy Wood. Brother, how are you?
Cheers, dude. How are you? I'm good. It's taken me a bit of finagling, and I apologize on the sporadic conversation.
There is no need for apology. When you're an in-demand person and you're trying to get a record finished, and you have a cup somewhere. Are you drinking something?
All right, energy drink.
Let's raise this to Andy Wood, Steve Morse's favorite guitar player.
Man, shoo. Didn't see that one coming, man.
How great is that, huh?
Unbelievable. I mean, like all last year, obviously if anybody listens to my music, they know I should be paying Steve royalties, right? But last year, randomly when me and the boys will tour or do things like Shiprocked or clinics or whatever, we'll always pick a couple of like fan favorite kind of tunes to do in addition to my tunes, just to kind of have a good set. And last year we were playing Too Many Notes, and we did it several times throughout the year. And when one of my patrons actually sent me a message and was like, "Hey man, are you sitting down?" I was like, "Yo, what's up?" And then he sent me that link. I was floored. I would have never saw that coming in a million years.
Yeah, it's one thing to have your hero be a great guy, a great person, somebody that spends them, but then when it comes full circle, and the guy that inspired you so much, I mean, you see it happen in athletics all the time.
Yeah.
A guy like Micah Parsons, who's standing on the shoulders of Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And to have Lawrence Taylor say Micah Parsons is one of the best linebackers that ever, you know what I mean. So that's what's happening here.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, man. They've always said, don't meet your heroes, but it's been quite the opposite for me. Anybody that knows me knows that I started playing electric guitar because of Brent Mason, and I wrote Brent a letter when I was like 16, and I keep that letter framed on my wall, because he wrote me back. And over the past, I don't know, 6 years or so, Brent and I have become buddies, and he does the Woodshed Experience, and he's like it's wild because, they say, like I said, don't meet your heroes, but it's been quite the opposite. EJ's been great. He's another big influence. And I actually just talked to him this week. We were, talking about acoustic guitar pickups and preamps and things like that. Cause when you get to, not to change the subject too drastically, but when you get to plugging in acoustic guitar, it's really always hard to get a great sound when you're flat picking, when you're plugged in. But I come from a bluegrass background. So guys like Trey Hensley's a buddy of mine, Jake Workman. So, we always kind of see what each other's using, and those guys have turned me on to the Grace audio preamp. And then, that's what I told Eric I was using. So, it's kind of crazy to have these conversations with guys that, were really formative to my career. Like I not to be too melodramatic or exaggerate too much, but I wouldn't even be here on this podcast if it wasn't for these guys, and that's the truth, right? None of us would have the sound that we carve without our input, right? It's like what you digest and put in and mix together and then put back out. That's your sound,
Yeah. And EJ was the first to say exactly what you said. Back in the 90s when he was doing that instructional video, he's like, you're a sum of your heroes,
Yeah.
It was the Cream era Clapton and Chet Atkins, and of course he had the piano thing that he was filtering into his style, but we're all standing on the shoulders of our heroes. And yeah, it just made me that me in particular made me feel really as I'm sure everybody that's seen that, because it also came on the heels of you doing something pretty fantastic for the guitar community with the Satch post. That was, you spoke for all of us.
Well,
So again, that's a that's a great thing.
I had no idea that was going to go as viral as it did. I was standing in a parking lot, you know, and a certain guitar player, I won't name his name, but a certain guitar player and I were chatting about it. And he said, "Hey man, did you see this one?" We were sending the posts back and forth to each other. Like, can you believe these guys? Can you believe this guy's trying to make Satch look bad? You know, it's like, and I don't know. He sent me one, and the thumbnail was like Satch's face. He'd like paused the Howard Stern thing to make Satch's face look silly. And that sent me over the edge. I was like, no more of this. I don't care if anybody thinks I'm full of it. I don't care if anybody thinks, oh, who's Andy Wood? I don't care what. It's like, hey man, that pushed me over the edge, and I only post things like that to my channels. You know what I mean? I don't go post them on other people's stuff. I don't tag other people in it. And if you see it, that means you're looking for my stuff, right? So somebody, you know, had a couple of sour grapes say like, well, who are you on, you know, what's your opinion matter? I was like, well, why are you here?
Yeah, exactly.
You're here for something, you know. I didn't put this on your page, my friend. You put, you know, you came out and found it, you know. So yeah, it was just one of those things that sometimes the guitar community can be so beautiful. Like this, for instance, this aquatone pedal. This is a design that they are raising money for breast cancer, and this is like the shining example of when guitar community does the right thing and pulls together and does cool stuff for each other and to help our brethren out. But sometimes the fans can be sour, you know, get pissy, and it shocks me that anybody would uh especially the people saying things that they would, how dare Satch step into Eddie's shoes. I'm like, well, how dare you say anything about Satch? You know, it's like, who the hell are you? Right, what have you done?
It's so ridiculous because you are attacking the guy who is, and I think you would agree with me, and many others would. He single-handedly is the king of instrumental guitar music.
It's the reason it became a genre that could be played on the radio, right? Like, I mean, he was the guy that won Grammys and stuff for instrumental rock guitar. Like, he's the guy, that
Yeah,
guy.
and it's bad enough because Satchari came forward and said, you know, that whole situation irks me and bugs me. You know, so he's already feels bad, and then there's people that want to heap on. It was just ridiculous. But what you said was succinct, and we can move on. But I and many thousands of other players applaud you for coming out at a very timely thing and saying just the right thing without making it too much of an issue, because haters are going to hate, right?
Haters are gonna hate, right? And that's the perspective you got to go with. But hopefully, and I know this for a fact, I know this to be true, and we can move on. But I had several musicians say that they had made that style of video, and they messaged me and they said, "Man, I feel like you were talking to me. I feel like you saw my video." And I was actually sending back, and there's actually a player I really love. This guy that goes by the name Tom Shreds. He said he pulled it. I said, Tom, I was like, man, I didn't even see yours. You know, I didn't even know you had made that style of video. And he goes, yeah, I sure did. And, you know, I felt like you were speaking to my soul. And I didn't realize what I had done because I didn't mean it that way. And I was like, well, man, hey, you know, everybody, if you dig around online, you'll find dirt on anybody, right? Like nobody's perfect. But I think if anything, we can all just learn from our mistakes, right? Like we're all going to make mistakes. Let's just not make the same ones over and over. Let's make new ones, right?
Yeah, exactly. But enough about that. I'm excited
Yeah.
about the new album. But I thought a fun place to start. I've been incredible, and this may not make it into the final. This may end up on the editing room floor because I don't want to drop too many names, other than to say I've been very blessed in the last 2 months to interview some amazing guys that are our heroes, but they're actually more your colleagues, I would say. Mark Lettieri, Greg Koch is next week, um, Lyle Workman, Carl Verheyen, Andy Timmons, these amazing players. And they truly are, the higher up that you get into the top of the top or the top players like yourself, kindness, humility, wanting to share, wanting to give, just wanting to find the greater aspects of what it is to be in community. And Mark Lettieri said something that was so insightful, and I kind of had this firsthand experience. What you've created with the woodshed experience is absolutely fantastic because you've raised it up to another level where all these other, um, like the John Petrucci thing, is where I first met you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's where we met.
And I've been to a couple of others, and they're fantastic. But I think what the woodshed experience is, it's a more, and Mark agreed with me that it was a more one-on-one, real hang, real immersive thing where you really get the inside of what the player's up to, but also being able to share what you're up to, and the people who are participants are way into that. And
Yeah.
it's community at the highest level when it comes to guitar. So I want to applaud you for, I haven't been able to make it because I tour with the Pink Floyd tribute group, and I have never been able to make it to one of the wood shops. I'm hoping next year will be my first time, but from what I've heard, it's just an amazing experience because everybody's so accessible, so giving.
Yeah. I think there's two things that really factor into that. I've always believed you never build the tallest building in a city by tearing other people's buildings down, right? And I'm not in the business of doing 30 events a year. I'm not in the business of doing 5 events a year. I do one, right? I think there's two things that make our event special. One is we limit it to 100 people. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, when I say that, there might be 103, there might be 98. You know what I'm saying? But like 100 is the cutoff. The other thing that makes our event really special is I'm a player first. I'm an artist first. I'm not a promoter. I don't book shows. You know what I mean? That's not what I do. I play the guitar first. I tour as a professional. That's what I've done for 10 years, maybe longer, 15 years now. My living and my income comes from being a guitar player. I make records, right? Like, even more specifically, I'm not even, and this isn't pulling anything down or raising anything up, but even more specifically, like, I'm not a gear channel. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a player. That's what I do. And when I emphasize that so hard, it's with reason. In the player environment, you oftentimes are in the middle of Kenosha, Wisconsin, or San Diego, California, and you're backstage with your buddies and you're getting this private one-on-one time to hang and share things. And God knows, like, I just ironic today on Facebook, it came up with the first picture of me and Andy Timmons hanging out 13 years ago at the Raleigh Music Academy when me and him were doing a clinic together. And that day changed my life because Andy's kind of filling me in on his approach to creating a sound and how you can have a note live within an ambience without the ambience clouding up the articulation, of the playing, which I always struggle with. You get it wet where it feels good when you play slow, and then when you play fast and you're articulate, it kind of turns into mud, And so that all of that, those secrets, those moments, like you said, those moments, those one-on-one things, they only seem to be saved in life for people that are players, because you're the only ones in those environments, right? My event is based on making that available to 100 people. And the only reason it works is because there's 100 people. I can't do that with 500 people. Hell, I can't do it with 200 people, right? You can only have that level of experience with a low number of people where the classes can be 20 people. And then at night, it's like you can have that one-on-one time. In the mornings, you can have that one-on-one time. So it means a lot to me to truly offer something that's a VIP experience where that's just everybody's a VIP. Like it's not packaged. That it's just like, hey, you come to this thing, you get in, then you're in. You know what I mean? And yeah, it means that we're looking at reservations and waiting lists and stuff like that going forward. But it's really special, and it just warms me up to hear guys like Greg and Mark and AT tell it to to guys like you, tell it to the media sources, I didn't pay them to say that, that kind of thing.
It's great, and this is uh, it's conjecture on my part, but I think that all of the guys that have been at the first and second one have an amazing sense of humor in addition to being great players.
Yeah.
Greg's hysterical. Andy's
Yeah.
funny. You're funny. Have a great and just the sense that it was so when I met you at the John Petrucci thing, those late night jams were so much fun, and you made there was so much energy. It's like
In that little bar room in the Marriott, right? There was just a little bar. Yeah, and there was I think it's a staff band of some of the teachers that host, and I just kind of crashed it every night. I was like, "Hey, can I play?" It was really fun. We played like Red Hot Chili Pepper tunes, and there was a lot of that kind of stuff. It was really fun. And I love Petrucci. I mean, like he's another guy where it's like, man, he heard a couple of tracks off the new record and he sent me a message, and it just warms you up to think that the dudes that you sit and used to spend hours transcribing their stuff and learning how to play their stuff, they're sending you messages saying, "Hey man, your new record is awesome. Sounds killer." It's like surreal, right? Like #blessed or whatever you want to call it,
because it harkens back to the days 10 or 15 years ago when you're doing the online forum things and people are trading transcriptions of Glasgow Kiss or whatever, Dream Theater tune, Metropolis or whatever, and
yeah, it was Glass Prison. It was me and Rick Graham and Martin Miller and Tom, and we were all on Petrucci forum back in the day. And Paul Warren used to run that forum, and it was great, man. This is like pre-Insta, pre-Facebook days. And it was a great forum. And I'll tell you who was about 15, 16 years old at that time was Jack Gardner, who's now a monster. Plenty was on that forum as a kid. And yeah, it was a great hang. And we would all send videos of us. How do you do it? Rick Graham actually sent a sick video one time. I'll never forget it. He was sweeping it, right? And it's alternate picked. And I'm a strong alternate picker. I feel like that's kind of home base. So that's how I would do it. But watching a guy sweep it, I was like, God, that's clean. Holy cow, it's clean,
It's very cool that the community that's emerged out of that, and a lot of you guys have gone on to have stellar careers. It's refreshing when you hear players that have the shred element, but you can also hear the Steve Morse thing and also hear the Sam Bush thing, and the EJ thing, and it's your own thing. It's clearly your own style and your own artistry, but I like that because it's a compositional approach where it's taking in all your influences and forging that into your own statement.
I mean, that's really what it is, right? Like when you look at any player that we always look up to, you can hear the DNA. Like anybody who listens to JP would be like, you obviously listen to Al Di Meola. You know what I mean? Like it's not that JP sounds like Al, right? You listen to Yngwie and you're like, you clearly listen to Paganini. Like it's not that, you know what I'm saying? It's like if you listen to EJ, you can hear the Hendrix, right? You can hear the Clapton, right? And I think it's one thing to that's a positive way. I've never enjoyed the carbon copy thing, the note for note thing, right? Like that's never been something that I wanted to spend my time on. But learning the essence, learning the little idiosyncrasies of different genres of music, and then when you're playing in another genre, it's like pulling it over and cross-pollinating those things. That's always been really interesting to me, and I think that's where my voice has come from. Obviously, the most evident is like the Southern, and I use that word very specifically because it's like bluegrass, country, Southern rock, Allman Brothers, ZZ Top, like all that stuff mixed together with a little bit. I did a couple of years of jazz school at UT, like a little bit of that fusion thing because of the Chick Corea, the love for that thing, the love for Al. I too love Al Di Meola, and mixed in with the rock thing because I'm a Van Halen nut. It's like I gotta have that sass and that attitude of a Dan Huff or a Jeff Beck or Landau or whatever. And I think all those things kind of mushed up together and put into a little ball and throw it. Like that's kind of my thing. And you know, it's interesting because I still consider mandolin my first instrument. It's like electric guitar is second instrument. You wouldn't believe it by all these amps, but
Yeah, although, to get a really good mandolin these days, you're going to have to stock away as much as you spend on a couple of good amps.
Yeah. Great mandolin should cost you about $7,000 to get into like one of those nice Collings F models or the man. I'll tell you this. I went to the Gibson custom shop. Shout out to my friends over there at Gibson. Dave Harvey, the older cat, he's been building some Master Series mandolins, some F5s. Yeah, they got what it takes. They're $20,000 mandolins that are $10,000, $11,000. Like they're great.
Right.
So if you're an advanced player, there's two right now at the Gibson custom shop that are monsters, just shotguns.
Yeah, I would think that you've influenced a lot of folks to maybe take a second listen that may not have, bluegrass may not have been in their wheelhouse, and maybe they never get to performance level with playing bluegrass, but it will inform their playing in a way that's only beneficial. If nothing else, refining your technique, and there is a certain pocket inherent to bluegrass that you won't find in other styles. That's a great discipline for your playing. So are you having people reach out to you, say, man, Andy, thank you for kind of opening up my ears and my mind to bluegrass?
Yeah, I think the most common thing is, hey, Andy, I love you playing. I want to get into bluegrass. What's a great dreadnought for entry level? Like my number one question is like, hey, I want to get into mandolin. I don't know if I'm going to love it $7,000 worth. Is there anything in the $900 range or $1,000 range that I could just try it on for size? And I always recommend some of those Kentucky mandolins or the Eastmans. Those are cool enough to get started. But if you love it, you got to get into the nice ones that intonate properly and all that stuff.
Right. The influence of Steve Morse, and it seems like there's something that, even though I don't think Steve was, I think he was originally maybe born in, I think he was born in Hamilton, Ohio, not far from where I was, but he was raised somewhere else. But it seems like the South has this thing with guys like yourself and Derek and Jimmy Herring and some of these other players that it probably happens in the rest of the world, but it seems like it's a thing about the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. Those players were kind of pulling from a lot of different things to present in their style. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, I mean, everybody you just listened to, is a pretty serious amount of cross pollination. It's like you don't have to dig too hard in Jimmy and Derek's vocabulary to find guys like Miles Davis, right? You also don't have to dig too hard to find things like Dwayne Allman.
Yeah,
so it's like this
Ali Akbar Khan, and you've got the North Indian classical stuff and
yeah.
and blues and gospel, and it's
gospel's a big one. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones about being in the South, because even little country churches, that's where you're going to hear a lot of old time red book hymns with that kind of bluegrass influence. But then the Southern Gospel churches, like my buddy Mike Hicks, I mean that's a whole origin point for R&B. It's like that's that. So I think gospel and church music is really, really influential in everything in the South, more so than other parts of the world, truthfully. And I think that's where a lot of that, like, I don't know the right word, conviction, like when players have that conviction, that's a very important thing to me when I hear a great musician, is I want to believe that they believe it.
Yeah. And it gets into the realm, and I'm sure you've had this experience where you you will stumble upon maybe a performance or a recording or something that completely goes beyond the instrument itself, and it touches a spiritual nerve. Like first time I heard the Aubrey Gant playing the sacred steel stuff on lap steel, and some of those steel players just floor. I was like, man, this is hitting a nerve, and igniting something in me that I'm like, now it's beyond fretboard pyrotechnics. It's like a whole different level of spirituality. You're touching a higher plane.
It's just musicality, right? Like at the end of the equation, it's just so musical. It becomes a language when it's done at that level. It's just a language. AJ Gant's guy that I follow on Instagram, I love his Sacred Steel
Yeah.
stuff. Killer.
Yeah, and then you got guys like Robert Randolph
I was about to say Robert kind of took it to the masses, didn't he? Like having the endorsement from the Dave Matthews of the world and stuff like that. Like it was able for him to take the Sacred Steel thing to pop culture.
yeah, and sometimes that can be a little tricky thing if you have your slice of what you do, getting it out into the bigger world where it can be exposed, and then people can start to draw from that. And there's again the cross pollination that happens when people are taking some of that approach into their musicality. Is slide something that you've worked much on in terms of either bottleneck, lap steel, any of that kind of
Yeah,
thing?
I'm a terrible slide player, but they sit here right on my desk just to torment me. I've never I'm not good at it. I set my guitars up to feel very much like a mandolin, and so it's a lower action. It's a flatter fretboard radius. Things not really conducive to slide. Maybe the flat fretboard is, but I use giant frets. Um, I don't have a guitar set up for slide. The other thing is I've spent a lot of time developing a I don't know the right word, but I always call it faux slide, like a faux slide kind of thing that I've spent a lot of time working on, to where I can incorporate those moments mid solo. Like if I'm just playing normally and I want to have one of those lines, whether it be the combination of bends in the left hand or the bar in the right hand. Jimmy Herring, the first guy that I heard kind of do that, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. He's doing it with the bar. Jeff Beck, right? Like took the Jeff Beck thing and made it more Southern, right? Like it's like Jeff was doing the bar thing and Jimmy took the bar thing and added Dwayne Allman and Derek into it, right? And the harmonica thing, like Jimmy's got this like fake harmonica sound that you do. And that intrigued me. And then I started wanting to be able to do it on Les Pauls and Telecasters with no bar.
Right.
I started working out ways to sound like it. Yeah. So,
The faux slide thing.
right.
The first player that I heard back in the early 90s was a guy named Michael Lee Firkins.
Yeah. A lot of people tag him in my post. And they're like, hey man, have you heard Michael Lee Firkins? And I've only heard a couple of tracks. I've never sat down with his catalog and like dug around. I need to make time to do that. Unfortunately, and that it's not, I don't know if unfortunately is the right word, but I tend to stay away from listening to guitar players when I'm in the middle of making a guitar record.
It's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah. So like when Andy Timmons released his new record, I was in the middle of making my record and I just didn't listen to it. And I wanted to, but it's like I don't want anything to get in there and make me want to do it because I love my heroes doing it.
Exactly.
I want to make my own record and let it live or die being upon its own thing. And if you hear an influence, it's probably something I've listened to for 20 years. You're not hearing something that I heard last month, right?
It's not like something you
So now I'm going to go back and listen to all those guys' records that were being made while I was making my record.
Yeah, Grace is an incredible record. I'm sure yours is going to be equally wonderful to listen to as well. The writing process seems to be different for everybody, but I think one of the common threads in this day and age is, with the advent of the iPhone, being able to put down little ideas, not having to go to commit to anything, but if you're just working woodshedding on something, pardon the copyright, woodshed, I have to be careful using
Woodshed circle R, right? Or circle TM, right?
it's great to have the phone to capture ideas, but is it a is is there anybody like an Uncle Ben that you would say, "Hey, Ben, check that. What do you feel
There's
like?"
several. I have several of those people. Travis Toy and Ben Eller are probably the first two people that I send anything to. Yeah, Travis, I'll wait till it's polished a
Yeah.
little bit more. Ben, I'll send it to him like I'll record it on an iPhone and be like, "Hey, you like this or not?" We so he's a really trusted source. Um, when I want guys that aren't elite level players but are good players, I'll send it to my guitar tech. Like he plays the guitar, John plays guitar, but like he's not like a professional guitar player. You know what I mean? I'll send it to him, see what he thinks. There's a producer that works here in town named Travis Wyrick that I've done a million sessions for. I'll send stuff to him occasionally. However, I'm really careful with him because he is a producer and he'll start producing it. So I'm just like, no, 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 no. Do you like it or not? You know. But yeah, usually my most trusted advisors are um, Ben, Andy Campbell, Travis Toy. Those are my top cats to like, hey, what do you think about this? Ben and Andy because they're going to be ones playing it, you know.
When those riffs are happening, are you often, or maybe not at all, got a click going of some kind that you're working out something like maybe
Oh no, oh no, no. These are raw. These are the guitar may not even be fully in tune. Like it's like this idea is grinding. Like I want to see if it resonates with somebody before I get to polishing it.
okay.
I like to see if the raw nucleus is worth building something around.
Right. And then I would think that the being instrumental songs by nature, the the hooks, you may come up with a cool intro riff or something, but then things slowly evolve with melodies for certain things or certain bridge components to those things. And are they do they tend to find their way into the composition as you're going along, as you're starting to, are you taking multiple pieces together and just kind of,
Oh
putting
no. Yeah.
Pro Tool, or is it less evolved than that?
Oh man, like every record's different, right? Not to give you a back history, but my very first record was written, recorded, mixed, and mastered in 10 days. Like it was just, that's what I had. That's what I could afford. That's what I had. Um, this record was made over the course of a pandemic, right? So like I actually started with 52 demos, 52, 53, something like that. And, the one thing that I made sure of on this record was I was not allowed to write anything technically impressive on my demos.
Well, that's
So at night, I would sit down and I would come down here after doing videos, Patreon, whatever. Oftentimes I just have like a bourbon. I'm not a heavy drinker, but occasionally, I'll have a bourbon at night to just kind of chill. Something that can last an hour when you're sipping on it, right? So,
maybe.
oh yeah, I've got all kinds of flavors that I like. But yeah, over the course of the pandemic, I was into the Basil Hayden, so I like Basil Hayden, and I would just have one, and over the course of the hour or so that I would sit down here, I would just hit record and just play melodies. Like I would just think about melodies, and never any of this, never any of this. Like it was just like, hey man, what's a powerful melody? And I would, mid tempo stuff like that. And so when it came time to make the record, I had 50-ish demos of verses and choruses that were like really strong melodic hooks that of course you can go in. I mean, you've seen players take Amazing Grace and put a wall of chops at it. You know what I mean? It's like you can put chops on anything. Hand it to Julian Lage and he'll make, Happy Birthday sound insane, right? But it's like my idea was like, don't get caught up in the arms race. Don't get caught up in the arms race of trying to impress my buddies. Oh man, Mark's gonna love this. Oh, this AT's gonna love this. It's like I don't get caught up in the arms race and just try to write some good music. Write things that move you. Over the course of the pandemic, I lost my dad and my granddad both in like 13 months of each other. And so those kind of moments in life, um, I music and melody was my therapy. So I was just trying to write things that sounded like how I felt.
Yeah.
And so when I got time to make the record, I was able to choose from the 52 strongest things and make the record that I wanted to make, and then add
Yeah.
the seasoning, at the end.
Yeah.
And it was the best. I think this record is the best. So
Fantastic. What you're describing is exactly the your colleagues, Joe or Andy, Timmons. They're trying to get at the heart of a beautiful melody that's going to you, and it's you can't teach that thing, but you've had a whole lifetime of touring, performing, recording, doing all this stuff, and you've arrived to the place of now, I want to write something beautiful, or I want to write something at the end of the day that it is expressing how I feel about a topic.
yeah. And I
Or
want it to be unexpected. Like the way the album kicks off is very unexpected,
that
So
that's a great way to, tweak people's ear, because if they're like, oh, okay, this is Junktown Part Two.
right. Like I don't need to make Shredneck again. You know what I
Exactly
mean? Like
right.
if you
Yeah,
like it's there, right? Like I'll do you one right here, man. And then we'll just let a little bit of this out right now on your channel. So I'm gonna open this to original music, and you can have just a few seconds of how the record kicks off, because I want people to like you said, I think the last thing people would expect is if the record starts like this. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
I'm ready to
yeah, it's like
pre-order.
I don't need to come at you guns a blazing. Like there's in my catalog, there's Truth and Line, Forgotten Secrets, and Shrednecks everywhere. Like I mean, I think that's too. Mark and I were talking about it, and Ben as well. It's like I'm comfortable to make this record because if you want to know if I can play fast, I made those. Like you can hear that. You can hear that right now. If you want to hear me play fast, it's out there, right? These records, this specific record is a lot more about storytelling, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so fired up about it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think I've got anything to prove. I made the record that I wanted to hear.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's players that you are mentoring either directly or indirectly that if you were able to say something to them is that just take your time. I think one of
Take
the
your time, fix it in pre. Be
yeah,
easy with the MIDI sequencing. Go
yeah,
easy on that stuff.
yeah, I
You
mean,
know, you want to stand out. You want to stand out in a crowd. When everybody's got things triple MIDI, quantized, sped up, faked, everybody's doing that. So if you come to the table with that thing, you're just bringing sand to the beach.
yeah,
Come
right.
to the table with your statement. Like, look at Mark Lettieri. Why does he stand out? Because it sounds like a guy playing great funk fusion guitar. Doesn't sound doesn't sound programmed, doesn't sound phoned in. You know what I mean? You can over edit, man. When you over edit, you end up with some weird stuff, dude. It's like it starts turning into like a Michael Bay film, and it's just explosions for explosion's sake.
Yeah, a buddy of mine was looking to do a debut of a new band project that he's looking to get off the ground, and he was talking about picking a particular night where he knew a lot of his musician friends would be able to go because it was maybe a weeknight or maybe it was a Sunday,
Tuesday or whatever, right?
whatever. And I was I think it's an easy thing to think, well, if I can just impress my friends, if I can just impress the guitar players out there. And it was like,
That's like this much of the community. That's this much of the world. You know what I mean? It's so tiny.
but it's the hardest knee impossible thing to do is to impress. And if that's your goal, it's always going to be a snapshot of a snapshot that's been Xeroxed, and it's so far
Right.
removed from what we got into it for. Because if you go way back to what we got into it for, the music that was getting us excited as really little kids
Yeah.
was not necessarily um, things that were like we weren't. I wasn't listening to Mahavishnu or Return to Forever.
Right.
I
Right. I think
later I got into it, but even with those groups, there was melody. But I guess what I'm saying is, in the end, if you're making really great music and you're trying to be yourself, and I think that's what you're trying to tell me,
yeah.
all the listeners, is be yourself. Don't
Be yourself.
yeah, don't
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go to Nam and you're in a room full of dudes, uh, play the guitar players, I'm sure somebody will make a pot shot or a joke at maybe Carlos Santana's expense or something, right? Because he's not the most chopsiest dude in the world. Funny thing is, like Carlos is going to play to an arena full of ticket paying general public people because his music connects on a level that does not require eight finger tapping.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? The statement is the most powerful thing. And the statement is not achieved by an arms race. The statement's achieved by honesty, right? Like when you say, what's your statement? I would say, I would challenge a lot of people. I was challenged with this sentence. I remember it was probably 8 years ago. I was hanging out. It was the first time I met Joe. And we were sitting at sound check in Nashville. I think I was out with Flats at the time. And sound check is this big warehouse kind of place where all the people rehearse.
yeah.
And my guitar tech, when I was out with Scott Stapp, had just become Joe's guitar tech. They were talking, said, "Hey, man, come on over and hang out. Uh, we'll just sit out here, have some cigars." Okay, I head over there. And Joe said, the conversation gets about guitar players. He's like, "Man, all these young cats, they're all, everybody can play. Everybody's great." He goes, "But what's your statement? Like, what are you going to say? Like, if you can play anything, what are you going to choose to play?" And that really hit home. Like, that really stayed with me. And that's something I always challenge people to think about. Are you learning to play, Frank Gambale licks on an 8 string because you think that's going to validate you somehow? What if that's not what your statement is? Like looking at Seth Rosenblum, that's a great example of a guy that's kind of been a bit of a mentor that I've been kind of always tried to, help. He's on his own now. I mean, he's killing it. But like when I met him, he was playing a John Petrucci guitar, shred licks, you know what I mean? And now he's one of the most hot young blues players because he found his statement, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. That's that magic. That's the thing there's not an exercise for it. There's not an amount of licks. It's not validation from your peers. It's just finding and whatever it is that you want to say and saying it and believing in it. That's why Jack White is Jack White. I know we're probably reaching out to fans and fans are being like, "Jack White can't play," blah. Like whatever. But that's not his statement. His statement is not technical prowess. His statement is like, "I want to make songs and rock and roll, and I want it to be raw." And it obviously works because he's going to sell out any arena he plays, right? So you can't say the proof's not there. People love it, right? It's like Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll is not a guitar player, but 40-year-old guy that's, overweight with face tattoos. And now he's one of the biggest forces in country music
Yeah.
because his honesty.
Yeah, that's the thing is being honest. And I started teaching back in 1989 or 90, and I would see time and time again students that would hit this phase when they were really starting to get pretty good, and their parents are starting to get a little worried because, oh shit, my son or daughter's maybe looking at a career in music. I want to steer them back into college, but they would listen to a player that was maybe Pat Metheny or Joe Pass or so, and instantly they would do a right turn and they would feel like I have to learn jazz to validate myself, even though I don't
Yeah.
like it. I'm gonna play jazz and I'm gonna amass the jazz chops of doom. And Meanwhile, I'm also going to completely disregard everything that I listened to before. I'm going to burn my Iron Maiden t-shirts. I'm going to get rid of all my Hendrix stuff because jazz. And I,
Is the most, yeah, that's by which we shall all be judged, right? And that's crazy talk. Like
yeah,
Steve Vai's interview where he's like, man, cultivate your strengths. I love that. Like that got so good to me because like if I'm gonna play, if I'm gonna make a record and we're gonna do Countdown by Coltrane at 300 BPM, I'm not calling Vai. You know what I mean? He's not the dude. But if you're doing Halo 2, one of the biggest selling video games of all time, and you want electric guitar on it and you want it to sound like nothing you've ever heard, you're calling Steve Vai. Like he's the guy you call when you need something that doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard, except it sounds like Steve Vai. You know what I mean? You can tell him when he's on the Zappa records. You can tell him when he's on Whitesnake. It's a mile away. It's like Brent Mason. You can tell Brent the moment it's a Brooks and Dunn record or if it's Shania Twain, doesn't matter. You call him because he's Brent, right? Not because of, well, oh man, well, he can play this song. He can play Cherokee at 280. It's like, who cares?
right. Yeah.
So it's like, unless you're a jazz player seeking out a jazz career of burning on standards, like Julian Lage is not Julian Lage because of those things.
No.
He's Julian Lage because he's like, here's my jazz statement. And he's playing a telly through like Princeton's, like the most unjazz setup ever, right? And it slams.
Yeah. He was somebody that probably benefited from being so young and spending time around a guy like Gary Burton.
He
That
loves jazz. I mean, it's like he genuinely loves that genre. Like I genuinely love Bill Monroe records. Like if somebody wants, I've always made the joke. It's like, I learn things, I forget them. Like there's videos on Instagram of me playing Donna Lee, and I couldn't kick it off right now if my life depended on it. Like I would die right now. But there's video proof of me playing it, right? In one ear, out the other, right? In through the hands, out. I forget it. But if you need somebody to come in to your gig at the Grand Ole Opry and play for 2 hours and it's traditional bluegrass, you can call me any day of the week. I have that stuff burned in. I know 250 bluegrass songs right now just because that's what I listen to. I genuinely listen to it at least twice a week. I put on some Del McCurry or something. It's a love, right? And I think that's what we're saying with Julian and why he's so different, because he genuinely loves jazz and wants to do other things with it. Yeah, it's like kind of unthreaded the conversation a little bit, but I get passionate about stuff and my
I
brain
mean,
just
I think everybody has it's like bluegrass forms the trunk of your tree. You know,
yeah, it does.
come off the tree, and they're varied interests and inspirations, but at the core, I mean, you wouldn't
And
have.
you wouldn't guess that if you heard some of my music first. Like if you heard Forgotten Secrets or Elfin Man first, you wouldn't guess that bluegrass is the trunk of the tree.
Yeah, the first time I was exposed to, yeah, I was maybe through that online course called shit. I can't remember. It's a British company that, or maybe not British. It had like backing tracks that you could, and it
Was
had
it JTC?
that's it. Jam
Yeah.
tracks. That's it. It was a Jam Track Central. Is that what it is?
Yeah, those are good guys over there.
Yeah, good stuff. And I think that's when I first heard you and Martin Miller and Tom Quayle and the gang. And at that time, I mean, you must have been either still in your teens or just freshly
Just
out,
in my 20s. Yeah, freshly into the 20s. Like I think I was maybe 21. And
right?
that's 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 21.
Interesting is because you guys did have that, and there's a through line for so many players, but for the things that make you similar, there's three or four things that make you diverse between you, Martin, Tom, and Rick,
Yeah. Our graduating class. I always call it was me, Rick, Tom, Martin, Andy James. That was our graduating class.
and you got the thing that you guys are just death-defying players, great human beings, but you really want to share, and you have an educator's heart. It may not be something you're pursuing as a full-time career, but whenever you can, you're trying to help folks out, and you're passionate about helping people get better.
I think it's just the nature of loving guitar and wanting to curate it and want to make sure that the torch is carried.
Yeah. there was a guy at one of the you probably don't remember this. There's a guy at the John Petrucci clinic that was asking about picking or something, and he was getting really revved up about should I do this, and I think your answer to him was yes, do it that way,
Yeah.
do it the other, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Don't get that hung up in it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. You're so caught up in the grammar and the semantics of it that you're losing sight of what it should feel like. And at the end of the day, my hand doesn't look exactly like John's. John anchors. I can't anchor. But if we both had to play the intro to Universal Mind, we could both do it. You know.
exactly, if
Right.
you took like it's a video game, like there was an app, and it would just be a close up of the top 500 guitar players from Pat Metheny to John Petrucci to yourself. So, and identify it based on everybody's different. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. So
we need
why worry about what it looks like? You should always worry about what it feels like.
so
Like get the one that feels good.
yeah. The epilogue to that is it seems like it's very easy for younger players and perhaps older players, despite it, but you're inexperienced to think there's got to be one way that's this man because I think, and that's what
Oh,
people.
man, so you're. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going to. I'm going to cut you off because it makes me think of the thing that I see a lot more of, which is like it's not really an age thing so much as it's a personality type. And like when people learn from reverse engineering, like you know how some personalities like they understand it better after they reverse engineer something, they see how it works, then they can do it over and over again. That personality type is harder to teach than the personality type that is like, okay, man, cool. I like the color 11. You know what I mean? Like the space cadet mindset is a little bit easier to teach because they're not looking for this uh, right answer
Right.
because there's no right answer.
Yeah.
It's like if there was a right answer, we wouldn't have people that sound like Tommy Emmanuel and people that sound like Jeff Beck
Yeah.
because they would all be doing the same thing because it's the right answer.
Yeah.
And neither one of them sound like Steve Morse, right? Or me or whatever. So it's like you got to remember that there's not a right answer. You're not trying to reverse engineer anything. You're just trying to find a way to play it. And it's funny enough, I've played too many notes a million times in my life, and most of the time that arpeggio section and the B section I play. When I'm sitting down, I pick it all like Steve does. But like when I stand up, the guitar's hanging a little bit lower, and it's harder to get under that top string of the arpeggio. So I've mutated a way to go down, up, down, middle, down, up, down, middle. And it's like, that's when I'm going to stand up and play it. Right. And when I'm sitting down playing, I'll just down, up, down. Right. And it's like, it's the right answer because I can play it. And if it's, not the right answer, then it wouldn't sound right. Right. So it's like, it's a lot of those things that really you have these aha moments in life where you go, I'm not meant to be a carbon copy of my hero. Right.
Exactly. And it's so tempting to want to be that. And
It's
there's,
because you love it so much. Like if you could just snap your fingers and I could sound like Eddie Van Halen, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'd do that shit. I want to sound like Eddie Van Halen.
I
But it's
think,
better that I don't, right? I say it's better that I don't, right?
oh yeah, I mean, but it's fun to dabble in that stuff because it all helps add a different flavor to what you're already doing. Nobody's going to sit around going, oh my God, that's only you know where that a particular thing came from. And if you pointed it out, somebody would go, "Oh, okay, well, I guess you're right." Yeah." But getting back to that thing that you said so eloquently, there's a guy Schopenhauer made this quote that is said something like, "We buy books because we are under the delusion that we're buying the time to read them." And I think what happens is people are like, if I just pay this money to go to this camp, if I'm just hanging out with Andy or John or Mateus Asado, if I get to know them, they're going to tell me what the secret is, because they feel like there's some sort of shortcut. Oh, Andy told me this, and
Yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah.
this is gospel. So now that I've got this,
I'm good.
but
But you're not, right? Because that's not the right answer for you. It's like the thing that I think camps are valuable for experiences or live concerts or any of those organic human to human scenarios. The thing that they're the most valuable for is exposure to something that you've never heard before.
right,
came to my camp because you heard me play fast with a distorted tone, but you'd never heard a mandolin in a room. Now you're going to get to hear what that sounds like, right? And that's what it's worth, right? You've never heard a banjo in a room? Oh, this
Right.
is what it sounds like, you know. So I think those things that are valuable. Like you know, at the John Petrucci camp, it was, all of us were just hanging out backstage and whatever you want to call it backstage, but like hanging out and trading guitar chops and talking gear and like that's the organic thing that you get from that, right? It's not like what you said where you're going to be like, all right, now how do I download it into my head and do it,
Right.
right?
Yeah. How do I get the secret
Get
sauce?
rich quick, right? Like that's and a million people on Instagram are selling get rich quick guitar courses. Want to be able to shred? And it's like, yeah, man, but you're miming that. You're not even playing it, you know?
So I will just thank you again for being so generous with your time. It was great meeting you way back when, and you're a delight to talk to. Very
Oh, thanks, man.
inspirationalist, man. Um,
Thanks.
the the one thing that, and again, I won't bore you with this, and this won't make the cutting room floor, but or it will end up on the cutting room floor. Is I'm trying to launch season 3, and it's been a great list of folks, but I thought it would be amazing to have one person that would kick off the season, but it seems, and I was just going to ask your opinion because he seems like a very elusive guy to get a hold of would be Eric Johnson.
Yeah, you're not gonna get that.
Yeah. So I just,
I love Eric. I love him. He's a sweet guy. And I can for sure shoot Max an email, but like he's hard to get to do stuff like this.
is it Max Crace? Is that the guy?
It. Yeah, if you know Max, that's your guy.
But the reason I say that, and I'll keep this as brief as humanly possible. When I was in my mid 20s, I had two experiences that were like being an MTV. Remember when Van Halen did that Lost Weekend with Van Halen, and you could win this thing where you would go hang out with them for a week or
Yeah.
whatever. This is
Yeah.
a great thing on MTV. Well, I had something in my own version of that. One was meeting Eric Johnson in Dayton, Ohio, and finding out that he needed some Echoplex tapes, which I had. And
Nice.
and then 2 nights later, I could stand on stage in Cincinnati and hear him sound check, and he gave me some T-shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
Super nice guy, and I think Max.
He's the nicest guy. Like the nicest.
But my best story was same venue. I go to see Steve Morse on the High Tension Wires tour, featuring Too Many Notes, Highland Wedding, all that.
Yes, that's the record. That's the record.
Van Romain and Dave LaRue, you couldn't lose. Just great, and he played the shit out of that out. I think he almost played everything off of that. This was 1990, and I found out that he had done a clinic earlier that day in Dayton that I missed, and I so desperately wanted to go see a clinic. And I met him, and he was talking. The next time he was going to do a clinic was in Chicago, and it was like a couple days later. At the time, I'm in my early 20s. I had a shit car that I knew that was never going to make it from Cincinnati, Ohio to Chicago. So I did the planes, trains, and automobile thing, and it took me the better part of a day to get there. And I went to the clinic and found out that the tickets for that I took a Greyhound bus, short and sweet. Found out the tickets for the show were sold out. So I figured, oh shit, I got to go back to Cincinnati. I just saw the clinic, and I got to go all the way back. And he was coming through the audience with his like an SKB, like soft-sided case, and his Music Man guitar, whatever that was, the blue one.
The blue one, yeah, the one.
And he's walking through the audience, and he sees me. He goes, "Hey, man, how's it going?" I said, "Oh, great." And he said, "Well, enjoy the show." We talked for a minute. He said, "Enjoy the show tonight." I said, "Well, I would, but the tickets were sold out." So he takes his guitar off his shoulder, puts it on my shoulder, hands me the case, and said, "You'll be my roadie tonight."
Oh, it's so good.
So we get in this Honda Civic, drive to the Park West Theater. I'm hanging out with Van and Dave, and some girl that sold T-shirts, and we ate Chinese food, and I got to see the sound check, and I'm wearing my Steve Morse shirt, and he was such an amazing, amazing guy. And if you don't mind, I'll text. I was able to tell him this past January at the G4 in Anaheim, or I mean in Las Vegas, the Joe Satriani thing. I got to have dinner. My wife and I were having dinner talking to him, and I got to recount the story, and he remembered.
Amazing.
There's a picture of the two of us together, and I'm like, it's so damn cool when your hero, who's equal parts John Wayne, Michael Jordan, any hero that you want to put up there, there's Steve Morse, and he's so nice and so down to earth.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I bored you with that long ass story.
I love it.
For the epilogue to be, isn't he great?
The answer is a resounding yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you.
I can't wait to hear the album. I mean, I just playing what little that you played to me is expect the unexpected. That's the theme for this record, right?
It's really good. I'm going to give you one real quick that you can expect. I'll just give you a couple of seconds of it, but it's what you think will happen. Right. Right, it's got that bang, so it's a blast.
Oh yeah, that's
gonna be good.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Andy. I hope you
Thanks, John.
A wonderful holiday, and one of these days I'll reach out to Ben. I think Ben would be a fun.
You gotta get him
because he's a pretty funny dude.
You got to get him. He's the best.
And I got to ask him the question: is what I had a stepdad as a kid. And he was a pain in the ass. Did Ben have a stepdad? Because he always we
all have stepdads. We all had stepdads. That's why that joke is great.
I had two stepdads, and they were both terrible pain in the asses. So I was just curious. As soon as I heard that, I loved the sense of humor. I thought, well, okay, so we all had stepdads. There we go.
Right, great. Okay, John, I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Brother, bye-bye.
Holler anytime, bro. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Hang Podcast. Interviews with noteworthy guitar players from around the world. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications to stay updated on our latest episodes.